Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sero Boost. It is my first recording in the studio for 2023. I'm very excited. And today I have with me remotely in our remote studio, Ellen van Oosten. She is Associate Professor, Organizational Behavior at Case Western Reserve University. I'm pretty sure we had some issues with us, scheduling this conversation earlier, and we had to reschedule once. But I'm really glad we could make it here today. And I was telling Ellen how excited I am about today because it's my first time for 2023 in the studio. No pressure, Ellen. But yeah, I'm very excited about this conversation because today we're going to talk about work-life integration. And the angle that Ellen is really interested to share with us is work-life integration in relation to personal thriving and flourishing. I can tell you straight away that I'm very interested in this because 2022 was a tough year for me to integrate my work into my life. I also suffered from burnout severely, and this was no secret from my team. I told everyone that I just desperately need a long break, and I took it. And now I'm back. So hopefully I'll be a better colleague, better team player, a better host for this show. And I think it's a really good one to kickstart the show with for the year. Obviously, this might get released a bit after the release of the first podcast of the year, but still, I think it's still a very timely topic to touch on earlier on in the year. So thank you, Ellen, for joining us. And now I would love to throw over to you to share a bit more about yourself. I'm sure the audience is interested to find out who Ellen is, who she is professionally, personally, how she got to do what she's doing. And actually, since we're doing this remotely, maybe a bit about where you're based as well.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. This is really a thrill. And it's my first podcast of 2023 also. So we share that together. So
yay.
Here's to us, right? And hopefully everything goes smoothly. And this topic in particular is one, as you mentioned, that I think a lot about and I work with a lot of folks around. I wear a couple of hats professionally. So I'm a professor at our business school. It's the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University that's located in Cleveland, Ohio in the United States. So I teach our MBA students quite a bit. So that's part one of my role. I also am faculty director for executive education. So that's a group where we are outwardly facing, meaning I do a lot of work with organizations who bring their managers and leaders and professionals to the university. And we have like mini MBA type programs that we do for them, a lot of leadership development. And also I'm a director of our coaching research lab. So at our university, we are a research institution, so we study the phenomena that we teach. And the area of coaching has been one that's been growing in practice globally, for the past 25 years or so. And research has been kind of scrambling to catch up, but making some really good progress. And that's a big focus for us at our university. And I'm an executive coach as well, so I still do some coaching and spend time with folks. So that's a little bit about me and what keeps me busy on most days.
Yeah. Well, you said you wear a lot of hats, and that is completely true. I was watching you talk about your work, and I'm like, okay, wow, okay, great. I don't know what to say.
I'm never bored.
You must keep busy.
Yeah, exactly. You're never bored. You always keep busy. And I think you're the perfect person to talk about work-life integration, because I don't know how you do it. That's a lot of things on your plate. So we'll find out a bit more later, because I'm sure you'll share your insights as well as your personal experience whenever relevant. And I think for us, it's better to start by getting to know the guest through the lens of some recommendations, which is my favorite part, because I think we tend to get to know people through small talks. But a lot of the times, these small talks don't go in the direction that are super helpful. Like, we talk about the weather, which is nice, but then I like to get the recommendations. So when we came up with this format of the show, I was excited. So I hope that you like it as well. And just the first thing that comes to your mind, I think it will tell listeners a lot about yourself. So are you ready?
I think so. Let's give it a shot.
Okay. Yeah, let's just go for it. First thing we would love to hear from you is, what is a book you would recommend?
So I'm going to be totally honest with you and all of your listeners, because I really thought long and hard about this. I'm a Gemini. I always come up with two. One book recommendation I'm a little sheepish about, because it's a book that my colleagues and I wrote a couple of years ago. But when I read book, I thought, I've been engrossed in this book for so long. So I do, and we're very proud of it. So that's one. But another is a book that I personally really appreciate and refer to. And so I want to offer that also. So a little bit of both. Is that okay? We'll do both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, when you get two out of one.
That's right. I know, buy one, get one.
Yeah.
So the first book is Helping People Change, Coaching with Compassion for Lifelong Learning and Growth. That's the name of the book that my colleagues and I wrote. And why that's something that I'm excited about is that we've taken a lot of care to collate 20 plus years of research around leader development and coaching, but also to add to it stories of real people who have changed and transformed, and also some guides at the end of each chapter for any of your listeners who are looking to bring this back to their organizations or even families, to be honest. So it's very practical in that sense. So that's one. Another is the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. I have a feeling that might be familiar for some folks. And she's the kind of the proponent and the author of the concept of growth mindset and growth in, fixed mindset. And I see you're nodding, so you're familiar with it. So that's that concept and her work and that book in particular are one that I feel I've really benefited from, but I also integrate those concepts quite a bit in my work. So yeah, those are two that come to mind right away.
Yeah, thank you. I love both recommendations. I actually haven't read the book, the mindset book, but I know about the concept. So now that you mention it, I might just put it on my reading list to learn about it a bit more deeply. That's a great one. Next one is a recommendation for a movie that you like or you would love to share with others.
So this one is fun for me because I get teased by my family that I have a one-track mind when it comes to a movie. It's a classic and it's an old movie, but it's A Wonderful Life, the Christmas movie, if you've ever heard of it or seen it.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life. I think I might have watched it, but I don't remember much. So now that you say that it's a classic that you love so much, I might need to watch it again. I mean, not really Christmassy anymore, but you know what? We can always watch a Christmas movie.
I know, and the story, the main story is so relatable across generations. It's timeless. So it's really, the story of a guy gets so stressed out. We're going to talk about burnout and we're talking about happiness, right? Stressed out because of, really significant financial issue that he didn't control. And he's going to lose everything. And he's so despondent that he's going to take his own life. And an angel comes down from heaven who gives him the gift of seeing what the world would be like without his life and without him in it. And so that's how the movie kind of just rolls. And it's just fascinating. Like I said, it's just a classic and timeless lesson for all of us that things are never as bad as they seem, certainly not to a point to take drastic measures, and that we each have a gift in the world. And if we're not here, then things, are not the same. And so, that's, I can go on and on, but that's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great recap, and it's a wonderful movie. Right. From that, movie. From the sound of it, so.
It's a wonderful movie of a wonderful life, right?
Exactly, I love that. Okay, next one. This is a must. What is a podcast you would recommend?
HBR IdeaCast is a great one. Have you heard of that one?
No, this is my first time hearing about it.
So it's a podcast where people write in different challenges that they have in the workplace, especially those if you're managing people or teams, or you're on a team. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be like only management type roles or issues, but that's kind of what happens. And then they get different speakers to be on the show and to address those. So it's like a Q&A type format, but the experts or the individuals who come on have a point of view, and then you just kind of riff off of each other, and more people call in, and it's just, you leave with some new ideas around some things that that you could feel very stuck around, especially professionally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing it. So far, all these recommendations just align with the topic somehow. I don't know if you did that intentionally or not, but I just feel like you're really passionate about the topic. So I'm even more excited to go into the conversation that we're going to have very soon about, the insights that you can share. So let's go through these, and then we can talk about the topic of the day. Next one is a famous role model of yours, or if not famous, then a role model of yours.
So, I had to really think about this one, but I'd have to say one person who's like in history that I've always admired and just thought about her life is Anne Frank. So, the 12-year-old girl who wrote the Diary of Anne Frank, right? And during the Holocaust. And to think about the courage and the fortitude that the 12-year-old little girl had, it's just really amazing. So I just don't see myself as ever being that courageous. And like, how did she muster that incredible courage? But then to write about it, so I work with people around journaling and just being able to like put your thoughts down in such a way. Anyway, it's just really she's kind of a light, I think, for so many, even in the midst of such a tragedy, around what she experienced.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, totally agree with you. I think the first time that I read it, it was kind of this like out of body experience, because it was strange, because I think I read it when I was in my teenage years as well. And it was kind of like, I feel scared because I felt like I was there with her. But I also felt empowered because, like you said, like I just could not imagine how she could have done that, because I was a scared teenager. I was, scared to just go to school and be myself, let alone, deal with something like what she had to deal with. So, anyways, really love that recommendation and sharing that honestly about yourself. So, great one for the first one of the year, for sure. Now I'm going to have to go back and reread her diaries, because I think, it's been a while. Like it might, because you know how when you read things as you age, they feel different. Yeah. So I feel like this time when I read her diaries, it'll be a different experience.
Right.
Completely.
I agree. And just with the world events right now, I find myself thinking about her. There's a professor, so a colleague of mine at my university who's from Ukraine. And then my husband's family is a person whose family is from Ukraine too. So we've had a a little bit more of a connection than maybe I've had with other world events. And I just think about the reality of those children, those people. And then, like, to your point, thinking about a person in history like Anne Frank and go, wow, it takes just so much strength and conviction and fortitude, right, to be able to, and optimism to be able to keep going. So,
yeah, 100%. Well, I think it's a positive note to start the year with, even though it was not like it's not like a lighthearted story or like a fun thing to read, but yeah, it's always empowering to keep that in mind. Yeah. So finally, for this section, I would love to ask you about a course you've completed. Now, I know you're a professor, so you must teach a lot of different courses, but I wonder, what is the last one that you completed for yourself?
So I'm excited to share with you a course that I had a chance to complete just in the fall. And it was called Values-Based Leadership. And it was basically like a retreat, or set up like a retreat. And I had the honor, because it really was an honor to be invited, along with a group of like 20 or so educators who do a lot of work in the space of values-based instruction and leadership development and so on. But it was this really like eclectic group of individuals and practitioners both. So it wasn't just like educators and professors. It was people really committed to the idea of discovering, their core values and living their lives in accordance with those. And we were able to go to like a retreat setting in the middle of the West Coast of the U.S., which is beautiful. It's got, mountains all around you, and a very kind of like surrounded by beautiful nature and animals and whatnot. And it was just an incredible experience to pull myself out of the frenzy and the hecticness, and like you were talking about your experience in 2022. So I felt like I really needed to get away, like you mentioned. And it was just invigorating to be surrounded by so many really genuinely nice and also very talented and inspiring people. So I just was so grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah. It sounds like the best of both worlds. You get to learn while resting. I don't know. Like, it's just, I don't know. I'm relaxed already listening to your experience. I'm just like, wow. Yeah, I would love to get that soon. It sounds like a wonderful idea. And perhaps if we're going to do any training, we can keep that in mind, infuse some resting into any training that we do, because that would help people to learn and really absorb information.
That, and also, a big key to this, which will tie right into what you and I are probably going to talk even more about, is the healing nature of nature. And so being outside in nature, so just having a chance to kind of surround yourself with that and absorb it was restorative, honestly. And there's a lot that's been coming out in terms of studies around this, but I think intuitively, as humans, so many of us experience this. Like, if we can get outside, get out from our offices more, and really enjoy the outdoors, it's just really opens up possibilities for us physically and mentally, as well as emotionally. And so we had a chance to do that. Our program was just in the morning, and then we had the afternoon free, and they had different activities you could do, but one of them was horseback riding. And I have not, I don't have any experience in that. And we would get on these horses and go up into the mountains with guides. And at one point in like the side of the mountain, the width of the trail was maybe 3 feet. And you're with like 3 or 4 others on horses, right? And I just like looked down the side, and I thought, my gosh. I mean, it was like right down. And the horses lose their footing a little bit, but they are so used to, the trails and the terrain that they just kind of like get themselves stabilized again. And I just had to take a deep breath a couple of times because I thought, well, you're on this trail. Clearly, many other people had done this. And don't look over to the right. Trust this horse. His name was Ernie. So we were like the big E team.
Trust Ernie. Yeah.
And it was such a freeing and fun experience. And so we got to pick a couple of days, we got to pick different things. And I just kept going back to Ernie, the horse, and we'd go on different trails. And so it was just really wonderful, and from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I love that. I've never gone horseback riding before. It sounds fun. Also a bit scary, but yeah, it might be good to try at least once in a lifetime. Thank you for sharing that experience. And you're right. It ties right into today's conversation, and we'll probably circle back to that in a little bit because I want to go into the topic and not keep our audience waiting any longer. So let's definitely go into this. Let's talk about happiness, all things happiness and all things work-life integration. Okay. So on this show, it's our tradition to always start with the question about your personal definition of happiness. The reason being, every single person would have a different way to define happiness. I don't know about you, but my personal definition has changed a lot as well over the years. And when I hear other people's definitions, well, 10 people will have 10 completely different definitions, like even if it's from a technical point of view or not. So the floor is yours. What do you think about happiness?
So I'm going to start with a headline that I carry around quite a bit. Yeah. And I'm sure it's one that you and your listeners have seen and heard because it's popular, and it's live well, laugh often, love much.
Oh, yeah, definitely have seen that.
So that phrase has always been one of my favorites. And thinking about it and remembering it or like recalling it is just centering. So it's all about, living well, which I can unpack in a moment. Laughing a lot. And I like to laugh at myself and, the whatever's happening, because there's plenty to laugh at there. But also just to be able to have like a good laugh with friends and family. There's nothing better than like a really good belly laugh, right? And it unleashes a lot of endorphins. And then to love much, to love those, in your family, your friends, just people in general, kind of like loving humanity, which on some days is, can feel like a challenge. Right. So it's a reminder of what's really important. But if I think about it a little bit more, so I thought, like what really is my definition of happiness? I think it's about being healthy in mind, body, spirit, and heart. And so it's like holistically thinking about all the dimensions of me and my life. And being like kind of experiencing vitality in all of those so that I can really love what I'm doing with the people that I'm doing it with. So I can be fully engaged and able to experience it and able to contribute, to others in, a meaningful way. So it's a both and. It's not just what I get, but it's what I'm able to give. So that for me is happiness.
Yeah. Thank you. That's such a beautiful definition. I can sort of pick a few ideas here and there that are similar to the definitions that I've heard before, but the way that you phrase it and the way you frame it is definitely new and different. So that's why I said, 10 people have 10 completely different definitions of happiness. Let's keep that in mind because I think that will affect what we're about to discuss quite a bit, because we're not just talking about happiness today. We're going a little bit deeper into work-life integration. So perhaps with your work, with your expertise, and with that definition in mind, you've noticed that there have been a lot of misconceptions about happiness. Because, for example, to you, it's about vitality. It's about what you're able to give and get when you're healthy in all areas of life. Maybe that is sort of leading us to a point where you've noticed some misconceptions in others where they don't really live by that definition, or they might lose sight of what happiness truly is. I think this is quite interesting to me, because each time we touched on misconceptions, something new pops up. So I wonder what yours is.
I'm not sure how original this is. You may have heard this from others, but I can tell you I feel like I've seen this more acutely and more frequently in the last several years.
Yeah.
And that is the misconception that many people have is that happiness is something you can acquire with stuff. Buying stuff, earning so much money so you can get more stuff or own more stuff, whatever the stuff is. So mostly it's like this quest or pursuit of material goods, which people then convince themselves is the path to being happy or happiness, right? When in reality, I think the only way that you can really experience deep and true happiness is from within. It has to come from within. So for me, that is, it's a bit of a trap for people if they think that that's the path, and it's definitely just a misconception around even how to experience it, attain it and experience it in your life.
Yeah. I think I've definitely heard something similar before. But now that you mention it, I think it's even more important to remind people, or remind others, whoever's listening, and then remind it to my own self. I've been traveling for a few months before I went back to Melbourne. And in those months of traveling, I told myself, no shopping. But guess what? I did quite a bit of shopping. And what ended up happening is, because I traveled after trips, so a trip finishes, I'll travel to another destination before I go back. So then I could not carry a lot of stuff with me. And so I decided that, you know what, even though I bought a lot of stuff, they will have to just stay at home in Hanoi. That's where I'm originally from. So left all the stuff at home, and then I came back, and then I was kind of like, well, I mean, I enjoy the shopping, but it's not like I need all the stuff, I just wanted them at the time, and I could just leave them there for until whenever I come back and just use them, So it's kind of like that, coupled with me going back to Melbourne, and the first thing I had to do was clean my apartment, because been a while. And when I did the cleaning, I was like, I have no space. Because the season has changed. Like, I have a lot of clothes, a lot of stuff. I don't know where to put my old clothes, my winter clothes, and I had to get my summer clothes out. And then at the same time, I cannot find my summer clothes anywhere because I have a lot of boxes everywhere. So it's kind of like, like going around all of that is just my way of saying it didn't bring me any happiness going through that process. It caused me a lot of headache, and I felt bad because I was like, well, I could have just bought fewer things to start with and spend less time cleaning and reorganizing, and just have a bit more serenity in life. That would have made me happier. So yeah, like I totally agree with that misconception, and I'm sharing my personal experience with our audience because I think a lot of people can relate to this. And let's just all start decluttering and shop less.
I completely relate to your story. We just had something similar happen here in our home. We had new carpeting, and we have 2 levels. So in the upstairs where the bedrooms are, we had all new carpeting up the stairs and in the bedrooms, and we had to clear off everything, right? All the boxes you're talking about, anything on the floor, anything that you stuffed under the bed because you were hiding it out of sight, out of mind. We've all done that. In the closet, everything had to be 3 feet off the floor. So you had to make sure if you had shoes and bags and whatever you throw on your floor in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And then we had to move it, and we made a commitment to not just put it all back when the new carpeting was down, but to like look at the boxes and say, do we need this? And try to pitch. And it's so freeing when you're able to do that. And the space looks so much nicer and is nicer to be in.
Yeah.
And you feel calm and peace-filled when you're looking around, as opposed to when I'm looking at a bunch of clutter or boxes or piles, right? So thank you for sharing your story. It reminded me of a very recent experience. So
well, we all need, we can all use some decluttering, you know, no matter how much stuff you have. I'm pretty sure you can do some further decluttering. I mean, for me, it's going to be my project for the first half of the year, just declutter, because like I think the space is smaller when you have more stuff. You know, when you have less stuff, any space can feel bigger.
Yeah.
So and it brings happiness and, you know, just a lot of peace. Like that's what I would very much love to have very soon. Because okay, we're going to go on all day about this, but let's go back to the topic. I'm very passionate about this, but we have another show as well about home organization. So
there we go.
Yeah, if we need to if listeners, if you are interested in finding out about decluttering, I'm pretty sure my colleague did an episode on it. I haven't watched the whole episode, so I'll probably have to go back, and now I'm gonna have to go through everything, because, you know, decluttering is important, but it's hard. You know, if it's your first time, it's hard. So for me, I'll have to like prepare myself for it. So
I'd love to see that episode. So we'll have to catch up after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll find it. I'll send it to you after this conversation, because I need to watch it again as well. Okay, cool. So now let's go into the official topic that we wanted to talk about. That was like a really nice segue into work-life integration, because I can tell you now, I don't want to go too deep into decluttering, but I can say a lot of us are working from home now. And this can be a small part of work-life integration. It's not a very big part, but the space really matters. For example, when I was, you know, trying to clean out things so I have space to work, I realized, well, I need to prepare my space so I can actually focus on my work. And with my place so cluttered and, you know, like not so zen, I couldn't really do that. So I had to spend a lot of time, you know, at the beginning of the day just to like clean it up. And, you know, like I was so glad I spent time doing that, because at least the workspace, because if I hadn't done that, then I just couldn't do anything, because, you know, like I didn't have space to focus. I didn't have the space to enjoy my coffee, have my lunch, and then everything would feel like it's in chaos and I couldn't really focus on my work. So like for me personally, I feel like that's such a big part of like my everyday activity routine. That's just how I see it. But I'm sure there's a much bigger picture to work-life integration. And for a lot of us, we've heard about work-life balance before. So now, you know, I'm keen to find out from you your definition of work-life integration. And for a lot of people, they might wonder, what is the difference between work-life balance and work-life integration? Because this might be a new concept.
I think it is for some. I know for me personally, I used to always think about, you know, this topic as it relates to work-life balance. That's how I always thought of it, described it, considered it. And work-life balance implies that there's some formula where you allocate a set amount of time to, let's say, your personal life and another set amount of time to your professional life. If we just even consider those as like two larger kind of buckets, I know that they break out into many other things. Well, that's not reality, right? Life doesn't really just separate out neatly into bucket A and bucket B, and we don't really say, well, I'm going to spend 35% on my, you know, personal commitments on Monday, but then change that to 50% on Tuesday or whatever. It's just an abstract exercise. And I really think that right there is why it hasn't really connected for people, because it's an academic or abstract exercise. It just wasn't reality. What is much more reality is that whatever our main kind of professional pursuits or commitments are, they're merged in with living and family life and what we like to do when we're not working. So hobbies or other responsibilities or, activities that are important to us. And so I actually think it's healthier to think about it as in terms of integration. It also is harder, though, to really think about it because it's easy to separate things out. And I think when the nature of work days were much more about kind of like a contained amount of time that was regular, like the classic, 9 to 5, which I don't know about you and your listeners, but I've never experienced like a 9 to 5 type work life ever. And that's when I've been doing all sorts of different things over the last, 30 plus years. So somewhere along the line, I think it's not most people's reality at all. And that has opened up a need and a challenge to figure out then, how do you walk through your day, walk through your week in a way that keeps you healthy and whole and enables you to allocate the energy and the focus that you want to and need to all these kind of different activities in your life. And so I think it's a combination of factors, but first is recognizing what are all the different hats you wear. That's one metaphor that, for me, I always think of, and I work with people around. It's like, what hat are you wearing? Are you wearing the hat of, your main professional job right now, whatever that is? Are you wearing the hat of, if you're a parent, you're wearing that hat? Are you a caregiver? Are you wearing that hat? Are you a volunteer? Are you a friend in this moment? So like connecting in with our core identity and being really clear, like, who are we and who do we wish to be? So sometimes we're on we're always on a journey, right? So that's evolving. And that's where I think that you have to start to really think about, at least to think about ideal work-life integration. We can also talk about just coping, like figuring it out and just dealing with the realities. For sure, we can talk about that. But I think like to set yourself up for happiness as it relates to work-life integration, you really need to think about your core, identities that you have that have meaning for you, and consider what kind of time you want and need to allocate to those.
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing to start thinking about, because I just started to relate to what I told you earlier. When I'm in my own home working and living, I don't separate my 9 to 5 from my own life. It's like, it's a part of it, especially because I struggle with understanding, for example, people in my own home country, Vietnam, how they work. They go to work and they do a 9 to 5, but most of the time it's also sort of like they bounce back and forth between the office and their home if they need to do certain things. And I feel like that's only fair, especially because, sure, we can be a professional at work, but it doesn't mean that we need to stop our lives altogether during that period. And there's the traditional office where people still go to work from 9 a.m.-ish to 5 p.m.-ish, sometimes even more than that. And then in between, they might bounce back and forth between, their workplace and home or somewhere else. And then there's this new era of remote work where, that I'm a part of, where we work from home all day. And, 9 to 5 feels a bit strange. Like, we can start at 9 and finish at 5, but we have a life in between as well, like little moments we can still have a quick coffee, pet our cats, our dogs, take a lunch break, watch a short TV show or something. It feels normal now. And I talk to a lot of my friends who do the same thing, and we all agree it's kind of like this integration and this new generation of remote work and other things that is changed quite a bit. Because in the past, like when I talk to my family and friends who are of the older generation or who still go to the traditional office, there's this sort of like guilt and like the need to hide what you're doing for your life. it's kind of like, well, if you're at work, then you have no life. For some of them, not all of them, but for some of them, it's kind of like that. And I feel like it's a concept that I struggle to understand, and still, I think that's why this topic is so important to address, especially when we're talking about happiness. You know, like if we are constantly trying to hide our life from our work and vice versa, do we truly have happiness? Like, I feel like that's a big no. But then I also would love to understand this relationship. You know, what is the relationship between work-life integration and happiness, especially for those that already don't know what this is about? Like, this might be a completely new thing to them. They might hear this for the first time for a lot of people, especially those who are not as privileged to be able to, you know, work remotely or have a job that is accommodating. It might be brand new to them. They might go, well, I'm happy just the way it is. You know, like I'm fine with doing however things need to be done, and just, you know, hide my personal self and my professional self and vice versa. So perhaps you have some insights that can convince them otherwise.
I have a couple of thoughts. I don't know about convincing, but I certainly have some thoughts based on your comments, which I really appreciate. So let me take one thought, and then I'll kind of work backwards a bit. But what you were just saying about kind of hiding certain parts of ourselves, especially the idea of when we're at work, not sharing, disclosing, or, you know, bringing up at all our personal lives, right? That's a concept called compartmentalization. So sometimes you'll find people who think it's the right thing. So this is now kind of like a norm that's more of like a cultural norm, perhaps, or a societal or a family norm, but it's the right thing to do. I'm at work. I really need to be focused on work. Nobody here needs to know anything about me, or I don't need to share anything. So there's like both ends to that, right? Like there's an assumption that it's irrelevant. Whatever else is going on outside of work is irrelevant for me, both to share and for people to know. So it's just work, and then I leave work, and then I live the rest of my life, right? Yeah. That still may work for some people, like you were saying, maybe in certain cultures, in certain organizations, that still may be possible. But for a lot of folks, it's not only not possible, it's not desired, which is also what you were talking about. So that is an important kind of human motivation principle, which is in order for us to be like truly like self-motivated, inspired to kind of go give our all, so to speak, to our work or whatever activities, we can draw upon motivation theory. And we know that we need to have some degree of agency, like say, you know, we need to have a say and to be able to kind of chart our own course to some extent. It doesn't mean we can't work for other people. You know, that's not what we're saying. And I'm drawing upon self-determination theory, which is DC and Ryan's work, and it's very well known. So that's one of their tenets. But it's not like it doesn't mean that you won't take direction from other people, or that you can't or won't work for other people. It's more that you need some kind of say or influence over your own life and your own activities. The opportunity that's been presented to a whole lot of people globally through the pandemic, which now has led to, like you said, a lot of people spending most of their time working at home. I worked at home. I'm home also today, but I also go onto campus and I'm there in person. So it's a combination. But that was a welcome opportunity for a lot of people because of the fact that now you actually can create your own space and you can kind of manage your day without somebody seeing or watching you. So if you need to throw a load of laundry in, or you're going to take a break and enjoy a cup of coffee, like you were saying, or maybe take a quick walk around the block, get some fresh air, you can do that. And then you can, go back and continue to work. So in many respects, that's a positive or an advantage, and it connects in with people's deeper interest and desire to be able to do that for themselves. And we see this playing out in the United States, in organizations here, and I'm curious if it's happening where you're at as well and globally. But the bigger organizations especially want people to come back to work. Not all. There's different sectors, right? It's different. But many organizations want people to come back to work. And the employees at all levels are saying, no, I really don't want to come back to work. And then organizations are thinking, how do we get people back to work? And what I'm seeing, because I work with a lot of organizations where things are kind of meeting in the middle, is that organizations allow people to stay at home 2 or 3 days a week, and then they come in 2 or 3 days a week. And the more people I talk to, like friends and colleagues, that seems reasonable. And the more leaders and organizations who are making those decisions, when I talk to them, that seems reasonable to them. And so I think we're, at least for a little bit of time, maybe this meeting in the middle allows those interests and needs to be met for like both sides here, individuals as well as like organizations do have, I think they make a good case for sometimes why it's advantageous and maybe even beneficial for teams and for like cohesiveness of the organization to be in person somewhat. So I think there's a couple of things for me come into play. So, but finding out kind of like your core identity, and then I guess the other thing would be what gives you meaning and fills you with purpose. I don't think we can get too far, from this conversation around happiness and even work-life integration without really thinking about what are your core values. Like, in other words, what do you think is really important? What do you believe is important? And getting in touch with those. And that's really for me, to be honest, the core issue. If values that somebody holds dear they can live their life and approach their work in a way that on most days that they're able to fulfill those, they're going to be happier.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think that this is why, to me, at least personally, from observing all these thoughts that just sort of play out, like, because I'm visualizing everything. I'm a very visual person. So when you're saying all these things, I'm visualizing the picture. I sort of visualize a world where work-life integration is taken more seriously by each and every single individual in a way that applies to them, just like you said, because it's not one size fits all. And this is interesting because I talked to a lot of friends after the pandemic, and we had a lot of lockdowns in Australia, especially Melbourne, where we're based. And a lot of my friends were saying, oh, I just cannot go back to the office anymore. I'm so used to working from home. And then they slowly got back to it anyway. And then on the other hand, there were certain people that were just itching to go back 5 days a week. And they're fine with it. They're really happy to go to the office because that's where they're happiest. They want to socialize. They want to bounce ideas. They want to see other people. They want to get out of the house and just, change environment. So truly, just like you said, it's not something for us to say, well, it's got to be like this for you to be happy in terms of work-life integration. It should be how it works for you and your values. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I couldn't agree more. And I think it probably says that the implication here is you need to understand for yourself what your values are to start with, and then find out a work environment that works for you, and find a way to, perhaps for some people, they will have to negotiate for work-life integration. Because I know that you mentioned 3 days at the office or 2 days at the office. For a lot of people, that's still like a process of negotiation. It's not like, yep, every company is like that. A lot of companies still demand 5 days at the office. And yeah, for a lot of my friends, I know that they have to go through a whole process where they provide reasoning. You know, a lot of my friends drive an hour to get to the office and then an hour back, and, you know, sit in that traffic. And even without traffic, driving that much each day, 5 days a week, can just have a toll on your physical health even. So yeah, like a lot of negotiations have happened, a lot of reflections have happened amongst people. And then now everyone's sort of deciding for themselves what is best. But, you know, it's also like, to me, I feel like this is one factor into helping people decide where they want to work in the first place. Because this might just be the first thing that they notice, that they're like, okay, this is green flag. Or it could be the first red flag, and they just kind of like, you know what? No, non-negotiable for me. I just don't want to go to the office, you know?
So that is spot on. And I think what you just said is like a lens into the Great Resignation. I think people need to figure out, you said, what really they want and need, you know, for their own happiness. And I think understanding your values and your identity is part of that. If not the most important, you know, thing to do, because you have to have clarity, right? You have to have like self-awareness, and you have to really know yourself. And that's not always, you know, available to people. A lot of times people haven't had guidance around that, or haven't really, you know, had opportunities or need to do that deeper level of reflection. But you remind me when you said that you're visual. So I'll give you and your listeners a visual. So if you just picture like 3 circles that overlap, like a classic Venn diagram. Yeah. So if you just picture a Venn diagram. Yeah. In one of those circles, think individual. And so we'll put like you. So that would be you, or, you know, anybody who's listening. So that's each one of us. Another circle would be the job. And a third circle would be the organization. And the intersection of those 3, we'll call that the sweet spot. In the individual circle is all the characteristics that describe you and make you unique. So that would be your values, like we're talking about, your life and career stage, your interests, right? Your strengths, so competencies, as well as weaknesses, right? Things that maybe don't come as easily for you. So in your learning styles, your leadership styles, your personality, all of that would be under in the you circle. The job would be everything about the jobs that we have at any given point in time. You know, what is the core job? What's the function? What's the responsibility? What kind of skills do you need? And so on. And the organization then would be everything else about the organization. So management, leadership, culture, norms, policies, you know, you name it. So the sweet spot in the middle, as you know, it's labeled, really is the point of greatest or most optimal engagement in our work, right? Interest in our work. Sometimes the greatest opportunity for our best performance, even the greatest amount of joy. So we talk about, you know, happiness and being fulfilled, right? When those 3 circles overlap and that intersection is as big as possible, that's where you're going to find joy and happiness. You're also going to find you're probably doing a pretty good job. You're performing at a pretty high level because everything is synced up. That doesn't always happen. Like, and it's not to suggest that every minute of every day, you know, we should strive for this really large sweet spot. That's not realistic. But if on balance, you feel like who you are and all that you bring overlaps pretty well with the job you're doing, and that overlaps pretty well with the broader organization and the environment, then usually we're pretty happy. And we're doing pretty good work. But things change, obviously, in the jobs that we're asked to do and in the environment. And we've clearly seen, like, just making sense of the pandemic with which a lot of us have had to do. And you and I are even kind of, it's coming into this conversation. The broader environment drove a significant change. So nobody had control over it, right? Everybody had to adapt. And then it opened up this moment where a lot of people thought, maybe I don't want to do this, or maybe my values are not syncing up with the job in the organization. And so that, what we're talking about, the sweet spot started to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink for different reasons than maybe previously. But then a lot of people had other opportunities open up, which had not been there either. And so therein lies, I think that for me, that's how to maybe consider or get ourselves on track for the greatest amount of fulfillment and happiness, is to really know ourselves, and also just to think about the work and what that overlap is, and think about the organization as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think what I take from that is sometimes you need to adapt. Sometimes you need to change the environment altogether, or in between, it could be some sort of negotiation, just like what I mentioned earlier, because there's a question, right? Initially, we prepared a question about how we can have work-life integration, especially to boost our happiness. And this is it. Just like you said, I couldn't agree more. We need to understand ourselves, because what works for me might not work for you at all. And, like the same organization can have two talents, and these two talents are completely different. One might thrive there, and one might just need a different environment. Or there might be a third one that needs to talk to the organization to find a way to make it work, because it could work, but not the way it is, for example. So I think this is probably a way for us to encourage people to start thinking about how their work-life integration has been going, whether they feel like they're fulfilled, whether they're doing good work, whether their life is also sort of thriving and flourishing, just like the topic of today. And from there, we can really see what to do next for ourselves. Because, I don't think you and I can solve everyone's problem, but for sure, this is the start to a pretty good strategy. And everyone can drop their own strategy. Again, I'm visualizing a strategy. So yeah, I think this would be a fun project for everyone to work on.
So visualizing something, if I could just tag off of what you're saying. So there is actually a process around it. You and I are talking about some of it, but the work that my colleagues and I do, a lot of us, is in this realm of helping individuals discover what we consider their ideal self or selves, if it's a group. And what is that? Because that's not usually, we don't walk around with, talking like that. The ideal self is really this very positive, attractive, like future state or future picture of what it is we'd really love to do and who it is we really love to be. So it's like the doing and being dialectic, so to speak. Most of the time, we have a lot of experience with the doing. What is it you want to do? We get asked that in our organizations. We get asked that in our families when we're younger, we're teenagers, and I have one child who's a senior in college, so she's almost like ready to go, be in the workforce. And I have another who's 16 and he's in his second year of high school. So he's really in the throes of like, well, what do you think you want to do? They're asking him at school, what do you want to do maybe in college, or what do you want to study there? Because then it depends what classes he's going to take in high school. I'm like, oh my gosh, like the level of focus at this age. I'm like, do we really have to get that, locked down at age 16? But our systems, these are the questions that we get asked. And so we get used to that. We're not as used to thinking about who we really want to be. And so that does include, like you and I already have talked about values, but it also includes just our passion. Passion is really about energy. Like, so what gives you the greatest amount of energy? When you're involved in certain things, when do you notice that you're really engaged in that to the point where like time flies and you really don't even know that like 4 hours just went, flying by. So that would be a way to tune in to kind of passion. What are you most energized around. And then another piece of it is purpose. For you, why do you do what you do? Having each one of us ask ourselves, why am I doing what I'm doing? What would I really love to be doing? And is this it? And another big piece would be dreams. And so it's like dreaming of it. What dreaming is, which gets a bad rap, but dreaming is really about imagining. It's about imagining a future or a state or, a time in the future and what you'd really love your work to be and your life to be at that point. So that's all around kind of discovery of one's ideal self. And it's a process. It's not like a one-time conversation. But the good news is it's actually very possible, and it's very hope-filled and energizing for people. And the kind of deliverable for those who like that term or way to think about something concrete is a expression of the ideal self in terms of a vision. And so you can write it out almost like a headline or like a couple bullet points or paragraphs. You can also come up with an image or a picture that captures the essence of it. And so you may have heard of like vision boards or things like that. It's that notion of imagery that helps us to like imagine something that we deeply desire. And so it's supported by a lot of research and a theory as well. So it's called intentional change theory. So it's very grounded in a lot of good science and evidence. And Richard Boyatzis, he's the one who really is the founder of intentional change theory. And that's like baked into a lot of different processes.
Yeah, that's very insightful. I think new information is coming through and lots to absorb. But what I picked up on when you talked about energy earlier, and this relates to our next part of the questions as well, is we get energized when we are passionate, when we're in the zone, we're in the flow. But there's an elephant in the room when we are passionate, when we're energized, but still we might get burnout. Like it might not have to do with passion. It might be because of the workload, might be because of other things. And what I've also noticed is even when you know yourself well, and even when you bring yourself to work and you can integrate your work into your life in a way that no one else can do, you can still get, go on the off chance, get burned out from being that passionate person. I'm not saying that this is my case completely, but I do feel like maybe a little bit of that from last year. I do know that my friends as well who have gone through the same thing, they also share with me. They're kind of saying, I really love my job, but I'm just so burnt out right now. Or they could say, I really love this job, but I'm burnt out from XYZ that happens at work. So I feel like there's something here that we can touch on also in relation to work-life integration, because perhaps this is what I've noticed for myself. I'm not saying that this is scientific insights, but from personal experience, when I'm not doing enough of what makes me happy outside of work, that's probably when I get burnt out more quickly. So if I say, work, even I work 8 hours or 9, 10 hours a day, and then at the end of the day, I just do nothing. And by doing nothing, I mean just, cook and clean and watch a TV show, or maybe even not just do any of that, just be on my phone. That's when I feel the lowest, even though maybe I've had a really successful day at work, and then slowly through time, that burns me out. So I wonder if that's a factor. And, from your research, what stood out to you, from the people that you've worked with as well? What is an interesting observation, or might be some insightful facts that you can share with our listeners?
Well, thank you for that prompt. There's a lot that's really coming to my mind right now. So one of the kind of realities is that for most of us, regardless of our work, it's especially salient if anyone has a management responsibility of a function or people or both. So it's acute in those environments. Or if you're responsible for another human being. So this is true for parents or caregivers too, that stress is real. And so we've all experienced that, and we all know the notion of stress. Stress actually gets a bad rap because as humans, as like a species, we're wired, we're kind of physiologically able to manage a certain amount of stress to our advantage. That's actually how we adapt. And we have to adapt. We've all adapted in the last couple of years to a lot of change and a lot of stress in the environment, right? The issue, though, is like stress can become dysfunctional or extreme. And too much of that kind of like chronic extreme stress can be debilitating. And there's different sources, and triggers for what might fall into that category. But what happened when we were in the pandemic is that there was so much uncertainty and volatility and fear, because we so much was happening that we didn't know, and the the worry for ourselves, for loved ones, for others, right? All this uncertainty created an extreme, broader environment that induced a lot of stress on top of just the normal stuff that any of us are dealing with. And when we're in situations like that, there's actually an acronym that was born out of what's called the Army War College, years ago. It's called VUCA. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And VUCA conditions are a great way to make sense of this idea of burnout and the role of stress. When we're having to endure and try to survive in these environments, we exert all of our mental and physical energy to the situation. And the phenomena is called the sacrifice syndrome. It means we're sacrificing, our mental resources, our physical resources, our emotional resources to, in this case, say the work. It could be to the situation. It could be to the relationship. But in the way that you and I are talking about it, it's about work. It's more like we're, all hands on deck, trying to figure this out. Even if we're in our home offices, right? It's like trying to navigate and adapt in high degrees of uncertainty. And so that's when stress actually becomes potentially debilitating. The antidote isn't to try to wish it away or to necessarily try to immediately drop out of the situation or leave our jobs. That may be for other reasons you opt to do that. But the antidote that's available to all of us more often than we sometimes exercise it is renewal. And so renewal is different for every person, but we can together even brainstorm, right, some common ways that a lot of people can find renewal. We already did, taking breaks. It sounds so basic, but we actually need to take a break. If you've been at your computer and on your screen for more than an hour at a time, we're supposed to get up, even for 5 minutes, get up and kind of get away from the screen, just move your eyes away. But it's best to also get up and move, right, a little bit. If you can take a longer break, even 15, 20 minutes, or maybe even you've got the luxury of a longer walk, for instance, you can get outside or get on a treadmill or whatever, get some exercise. But even getting outside and getting in nature, like we were talking about at the beginning, these are all ways in the moment to be able to renew yourself. Of course, yoga, Tai Chi, also stretching, those are all also very good. Prayer, rest, taking a nap, just kind of resting your eyes and taking a nap is another one. You mentioned petting our cats and dogs. There's the science behind that is it's anytime you can like pet an animal, the key is it has to be animals that you can stroke, like a cat, like a dog, like a horse, maybe a rabbit, not so much a tarantula, not so much a snake, maybe fish. I know some people who really love their fish tanks because like you can kind of like maybe just watch the fish. It's very calming, you know, just to watch perhaps. Yeah. But there's more, we know more about kind of what happens in the internal activation of our hormonal systems with pets we can actually stroke. So that's a big part of it. And being around people we love and care about. So spending time with your good friends, you know, your family, people who you wish you enjoyed being with. It's about spending time, like connecting with them. So the key is, again, we call it the sacrifice syndrome, but it's a stress and renewal cycle. So I would leave everyone with that idea of like, what are you doing for you that helps you with renewal in short bursts? And then if you're really feeling burnout, like a bigger burnout, then you probably need a longer reset. Like if you had the opportunity to take a trip like you did, or just kind of get away. Not everybody does, but if you can do that, that hits a reset button that's going to give you more lasting effect.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's also interesting to me because I was not the only one that suffered from burnout last year, and probably our audience can relate. But I feel like that cycle that you just mentioned is something that we might not think about a lot of the times. We're just kind of like, oh, I don't know how to get out of this. So hitting that reset button is just what people need. And I already agree with everything he said, nothing else to add. But I do want to share a little story from my friend, because I think that this story might just, inspire others in the sense that you can recover from it. And, maybe you think that was the end of it and you just don't want to deal with anything anymore. There's a way out and it will come to an end. And then, you'll get invigorated again. So I have this really, like, one of my best friends, she found a great job last year, and on paper it sounded great. It was one of the biggest companies in the world, and we were really proud, really happy for her. But then 3 months into the job, she just did not want to do anything, and she seemed like a completely different person. So I noticed the signs of burnout. So coming back to the topic, the work-life integration was getting worse by the day. So, I noticed that she was doing less and less for herself. She was not going out anymore. She loved doing ballets and doing photo shoots and things like that. And she just stopped doing those altogether. So I sort of noticed, so the initial signs of burnout, and then this work-life integration becomes just work and barely any life apart from, hanging out with friends. And even when we were hanging out, she was kind of out of it as well, like not really into the conversation. And then this is something really funny, but she loves composting. And at one point I noticed she just stopped composting altogether. And even like trying to be green as well, she just stopped because she had literally no energy left. And that's when I noticed there's that, burnout. And obviously she could work from home some days and try to have that level of work-life integration. But obviously, I think she didn't understand the severity of the work what the work was doing to her. So 6 months later, she left the job and she told me, you know what, I just don't think I can work anymore. Like at this stage in my life, no more work. Like I don't want to find a new job. All I want is just to travel. So at the same time, I also started, to visit my family. So we didn't talk very much, but she also started traveling to Southeast Asia. And her plan was to next travel to Europe and then the US and Canada. But towards the end of the Southeast Asia trip, she sounded a bit happier, and we managed to catch up in Vietnam. She was on her way to another country and I was visiting my family. So we managed to catch up for one day. So in that one day, we had a lot of conversations, and she was kind of saying to me, now I can hear about work. Previously, I don't even want to hear other people talk about work. And I was like, wow, that's very interesting. I didn't know you could get burnt out from just hearing about work. So her burnt out was much worse than mine, because I could still hear other people talk about work, like just not my work, you know? So then I realized, wow, it's really severe. But then a few days ago, we hopped on a call, now that we're both back in Australia. She's in Sydney, I'm in Melbourne, hopped on a call. And she said, I've started to look for jobs again, because I think I've recovered from that burnout. I thought it was going to take forever and much longer, but now I think I can work some more before I continue traveling, because there are other life goals that I wanted to do. So, like, this is interesting to me. Coming from my own best friend, I didn't know that this could happen. I didn't see the cycle, until you sort of mentioned the theory behind it. And now I see the example. I'm kind of like, wow, okay, that's very interesting. And the work-life integration, from my perspective, was really good for her at the beginning, but it kind of just went downwards. And then there's this spiral as well towards the end where she just gave up on it altogether, because initially she was like really diligent with her life, trying to keep up these good activities and other things, but at one point it affected her too much, and then in her case she had to change the environment and hit that reset button big time. So yeah, that's one example of a real life person going through burnout, learning more about their own work-life integration, and hopefully we'll do better next time. So yeah, I find that very interesting.
Experience, and I'm sure people can relate to that. And I'm so happy that your friend is starting to kind of feel more like herself and have energy, right, to re-enter the work. There's something that might be of interest to you and your listeners that your story also is reminding me of, and that is there's like two dominant neural networks that we have. We have like thousands of networks in our brain, but there's two dominant ones. Think of them as like super highways. One of them we engage every time we're in the midst of tasks. So we call it the task positive network. It's also considered the analytic network. So anytime you're involved in work where you're marshaling all of your energy, your mental capacity and your focus to whatever it is. Another neural network that's a super highway is called the default mode network. The layman's terms for that is the empathic network. But the default mode network is activated when we are considering moral issues, when we're imagining, when we're creating, when we're connecting with our friends like you did. So when you're listening, to others, when you're brainstorming, you're considering, again, possibilities, right? The kind of big aha that came out of some work that my colleagues at Case Western Reserve did, this is Tony Jack and his lab and Richard Boyatzis and others, was that we cannot activate both of these dominant neural networks simultaneously. That may sound like so what, right? But think of it this way. You cannot drive on two highways at the same time, right? You have to kind of get off of an exit ramp and then take another bypass of some sort to get to the other highway. It works the same way. So like in your friend's case, and in this broader topic we're discussing of burnout, when we're in these modes where like all of our energy has been sucked up in this situation, we literally like our vision, kind of our peripheral vision, literally shrinks. And if you think about it, that's kind of how we are. And we retreat just like your friend did. So it's kind of like our life starts closing in. We have no more energy. We have our brain capacity. We're not accessing that other network and all that represents for us. It's all about the work. It's the work. It's the work. And it can become severe. It sounds like that was a severe case, obviously. And burnout, I think, represents that. But sometimes then you're going to have to do something much more jolting than for case she left the work, to be able to then give yourself a break. And so your human system, it sounded like she was able to just kind of surrender. Not everybody, can do that. And sometimes people don't feel like they can. And so there's very dire kind of results that sometimes come out of this awful, situation. My wish, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd wish that organizations understood what you and I are talking about in this phenomena and would give people more of kind of like a sabbatical type idea. Allow people to take a little bit longer break. We're not talking every month, right? But at certain times, people need it and they come back much more energized, restored, which allows them then to be more creative, to be more productive, right?
Yeah.
So instead, so many times we treat it as like there's something wrong with this person and they used to be a good worker or whatever. And it's a performance issue when actually it really is a need for a big reset.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree with you. Well, I mean, I'm in a very different position now. I'm in a leadership position as well as doing this podcast. But previously, before this work, I was on the same boat as other people, just like my friend. And that hit home really hard. And I do wish that organizations hear us as well, because what happened to me, and this made me really sad, was I was burnt out and I called for help. So, in the current company, I'm really happy with where I am, because when I called for help, I got the help and people understood what I was saying and they gave me the break I needed and everyone was supportive of it. On the other hand, when I was crying for help at the previous organization, I asked for mental health support. And what ended up happening was I was given a performance training. So just like you said. And and then to be honest, like they told me this came from them, not from me. I was one of their top performers. But then when I was burnt out, then it was a performance issue. So like it's unfair, and to a lot of people this might be the case as well. So I agree with you, and I do hope that organizations take our words. If there are any leaders, anyone from a management position that can take this up, I do hope that they hear us, because rest is very important for everyone. At certain points, people just need to take a long break and hit reset, and they'll come back better for the organization.
Absolutely.
So like everyone wins. So that sort of wraps up our part where we talk about the insights, and the practical parts will now come. But to really wrap it up, thank you for sharing all your insights about work-life integration. A lot of new words for me, so I'll probably have to listen back to this. But now to be on the practical side, we always like to get practical as well. And this will be a really quick one, won't take too long. But we normally talk about a practice or a habit. Now, during our conversation earlier, when we were talking about your research insights and your other work, you already mentioned quite a few. For example, stay in nature, exercise, journaling. You sort of threw the word here and there, and I caught some of them. But I wonder if this was something to start with. What is something that anyone can try? And maybe this is something that you have done for yourself to improve their work-life integration.
Specifically work-life integration, I was thinking like to help them with like meaning and fulfillment and happiness. So work-life integration, one of the best things you can do, or at least experiment with, so just try it, would be consistent start and pause points, if not completely like stopping. Using in integrating work and life, I find there's a lot more of pause, do something else, and then come back to the work. So that's why I said what I did.
Yeah.
But the more consistent you can be around kind of starting and kind of stopping, you actually train yourself to know this is my time for this, for work or for whatever. I'll give it my all. And now it's time for me to take care of myself with exercise, or for me to get together with my family and friends, or for me to, clean my apartment or my home or whatever it is. I think so many times we're all kind of mixing everything together, and sometimes that's novel for a little while, and then it gets a little uncertain. Like, well, what exactly is happening? So we have a natural need to varying degrees by person but we have a natural need for some degree of order. And so if you can create a little bit of that, start your day at whatever, let's just say 8 o'clock, and pause, like a hard pause at 5 o'clock, and go do something else for a couple of hours. And the more you can do that, the more it's a lot easier. So the other practice I would say, and I'm a kind of a work in progress myself on this, but I'm appreciating how helpful it is the power of the break. Take a break. And so think about breaks throughout your day, how you can integrate them and be deliberate around them. Those are like micro breaks, but then at certain times you're going to need a macro break, which is like a vacation or a longer period. And so breaks like at different kind of levels is something to really think about and experiment. But the key is I work with so many people who are like, I don't need a break. I'm fine. And sometimes I fall into that too. Like, I'm just going to finish this. And then you're working at your computer from 8 in the morning till 10 at night. It's like your friend, right? Then you do it day in, day out, day in, day out. And that's how you get in this like kind of a rut around it. So those are a couple of specific practices that I would offer. So, and just get out in nature as much as you can.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think those are both really practical and doable for a lot of people. We do sort of want to explore the benefits a bit more. I know you've already mentioned, this would help. That's the general idea, but to list out, let's say 3 key benefits to this, especially for someone who's never done this before, what would be the 3 benefits that they would feel once they start doing these practices?
One is sense of control. So this idea of, again, starting and stopping, regularity, like a routine that actually intuitively provides calm and order, which gives us a sense of control. Another is energy for various arenas of our life that are important to us. So if you can kind of give your focus and energy to certain things for a certain amount of time, and then know you're going to have a pause or a break or a stop, then you actually look forward to whatever else it is. And, you have got energy for that. So as an example, right after you and I wrap up, it's going to be 6 o'clock here in the evening for me in the United States. And I, on Thursday nights, play tennis. So I have at 7 o'clock ladies tennis league. And so as soon as we're done, every Thursday, this is where I go at 7 o'clock. So I now try not to miss that, because I know that's something that's on my calendar. It gives me order, but I also now have energy. I have energy for our conversation, and then I have energy to go do something else that I know is good for me, and I enjoy the people I do it with. So that's what I mean by, by energy. And then the third thing would be, it sets you up for more fulfillment. So if you're always, in a burnt out state, right, you're not able to be the best version of you, obviously. And I'm not suggesting just with a little break throughout the day, all of a sudden your life's going to change. I don't mean that, but I mean the more that you can work towards kind of a rhythm that supports you and your needs and your, family and commitment or work or whatever your situation is, you actually then start to experience feeling more healthy and whole more often. And that's a good place to be.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, if that doesn't convince people, then I don't know what else would. I love that already. Definitely, we should try these practices. If anyone hasn't
try to take breaks or try to set up a routine for their work days. I think, yeah, those are the really good starts because, well, think of myself. I'm like, well, I do start my workday and stop my workday at a relatively regular time. But sometimes it just goes out of whack, you know, when you have a lot to do. It's just kind of like, I'm going to start a little bit earlier today. I'm going to finish a bit later today. And you know what? That doesn't help because you're just going to feel bad about yourself. And then, you know, you don't feel rested, might lead to burnout. And then you might need to, you know, spend more time recharging. So yeah, like I think this is part of self-care, isn't it? You just got to prioritize your rest time. Cool. Well, I would say that to any working professional, this is recommended. I would also say it might be challenging because I can see that it would be challenging for myself. We don't need to necessarily list out the challenges together. I'm sure everyone could relate. So I think it's just to wrap it up, I guess, the final things we should say to our audience about these practical habits would be, how can they, you know, overcome the challenges? Maybe it's in their head, you know, maybe they're like, oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, maybe it's too hard. Oh, I cannot do it because I have kids. So my routine would be dependent on my kids. Or, you know, I live in a shared home. So might not be able to do that because, you know, I depend on a lot of other people, something like that. I don't know. There might be multiple reasons. So how should people start to overcome these challenges and just truly embrace setting up their routine, have a break, you know, stop their day at a relatively similar time so that they can take back the control and enjoy all the other benefits that you just mentioned?
I think it starts with understanding and appreciating that you're a human being. And even if you're the most energetic person and you are a person who doesn't need a lot of sleep, that you're a human being that still needs rest or breaks, that you're really not, it doesn't serve you well to go 150 miles an hour every day, you know, every day of the week, every week in the month. At some point, it's going to catch up with you. And so I see a lot of people in denial around that. And I have to say I've fallen into that category as well. And it really goes back to sacrificing myself, or maybe others relate to what I shared earlier, sacrificing ourselves to the work. I can just do one more hour. I just have to get this done. Like you said, I'll just get up earlier because this has to get done, and or we hit a snag on the project or whatever. And yet you owe it to yourself, to keep yourself as healthy and whole and centered. And you really owe it to everybody else around you. So if you won't or can't do it for you, then do it for all the people who are counting on you and who need you to be able to be fully present and the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Actually, I'm itching to ask this one final question related to that. Another challenge I've just realized, and you might add to this, there might be other challenges, but I just realized there's one challenge. And again, this is from another friend of mine, yet another friend, learned so much from all my friends. She just cannot say no to work. And there are certain parts of the world, and there are certain kinds of organizations that demand people to sacrifice their life for work, for the organization, in the sense that, well, when you're in, you have a lot of perks, so might as well just, you know, sacrifice your life for all these perks. And to me, I observe that my friends she just does not enjoy any perks, but she goes to work early and sometimes she goes home at midnight. And she doesn't know how to say no to it. And there's no start or stop. And I think catching up, I mean, this is our joke in the group. Like, catching up with you is harder than meeting the president of the United States, man. Like, it's just so hard. Like, how do we see you these days? But to those people, you know, what would be your advice to them? Because I feel like our strategies offered are great, but they might not be able to take any of that at all.
Consider why you're doing what you're doing. So that's one. right? Like, why are you working 17 hours a day or whatever it is, you know? Somebody said this to me years ago and it has stuck with me. So it's coming to me now. And that is, if you say yes to this, in this case, work, projects, more demands, whatever, you say yes to this, what are you saying no to? And so always considering, if here's another thing I'm supposed to do or asked to do or even would like to do. So sometimes it's our own interest, right? If I say yes to this, what does it mean I'm saying no to? And to get really clear on that. But she's lucky to have you and the others as good friends. And I guess I would also say to listen to the people who care about you. I was in a very similar situation many, many years ago, working really crazy hours in an organization that knew no boundary for the amount of work that, you know, people could and really were expected to put in. And at that point in my life, it was like my late 20s. I was not married and I didn't have children. So I was a young professional. And I remember my mother saying to me a lot, you're working too much. It's extreme. You're going to get sick. If you don't stop, you're going to get sick. And of course, at that point, you're like, yeah, I don't want to listen to you. You know, thanks, Mom. But actually, deep down inside, I started to listen to her and I thought she's right, because I had retreated. I wasn't going out with my friends. I wasn't really involved in anything else. I didn't have time or energy for it. And then I thought, I don't think I want to live like this. But it was finally I was listening to her voice after a while. And I thought there's a little bit of truth here. And I don't want that to happen. And so it was kind of, I wasn't looking for a job because I had no time, but I was, I got lucky and had an opportunity with somebody I knew from a previous life who was a professor, you know, reached out to me and presented a really cool job. And I think it saved me. To be honest. It was really like a lifeline. Because I don't know what would have happened. But I was very burnt out and miserable and getting very lonely because I was not doing anything with all my friends and my family. So I was very unhappy. So we started at the beginning around happiness, you know, and being vital in terms of our health. And I can tell you, I've come to that from some personal experiences as well as being in the field that I'm in. But I understand what your friend's going through, and she's lucky to have you and others. And continue to gently surround her, you know, with compassion and care, and try to encourage her to kind of come out and do things with you, because you might actually be helping her, you know, in a way that she can't help herself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for opening up and sharing a bit more about your personal story, and for encouraging people like my friends. I'm sure she would really appreciate the kind words, because, you know, sometimes it's hard for me to talk to her even. Like, you know, I tried, definitely have tried, but it's hard. So now that we have an expert's advice, I hope she'll listen to me more. But yeah, like that wraps up our practice and habit debrief. I think it's been really good to try and get more practical, and hopefully our listeners can benefit from the tips that we've shared, and you know, especially from the stories. You know, I think we relate to stories as humans, so hopefully this would help. And the next part, we normally have a lot of questions from audience, but I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to select the best question that I see, and let's talk about it from a different angle. So we've talked about the role of ourselves. And I saw this question from the audience that I just love. They've kind of turned the table around, and this time they want to know from the other side of the table, how can employers support their employees in achieving work-life integration, and what benefits does this bring to the workplace?
That is a great question. So thank you for the person who asked that. And I'm very energized around this because I spend a lot of time with organizations. And here's one thing that I would say to the organizations, and I have. You need to help people and expect your managers specifically to have conversations with their employees, and conversations where they check in with them and they ask them how they're doing, and they stop and listen to the answer. And I don't mean to be oversimplifying this, but I'm working with a number of organizations where they're trying to equip their management to understand why and how they need to have what I consider to be just kind of human conversations. But most of the time, they're either not even connecting at all with those on their team, or it's all about the work and only the work. And so I have a story, since I agree with you, like stories and examples are helpful, and I'll make it really quick. But I was coaching a senior leader once, and he was feeling very disconnected from his team. He had like 7 or 8 people on the team, and he had been traveling. And when I asked him how it's going and, you know, how he wanted to use the time that we had, he said, well, things are generally okay. The results are there, because I just feel really blah. I feel like I don't even know the people on my team, and that doesn't feel good. And so we talked about that a little bit more. And I said, well, what is it that you think you want to do or could do? And he's like, I really don't know. I don't have a whole lot of time. So I gave him that as a mini assignment. Like, why don't you just sleep on this? Go think about it. What's something you could do that would help you feel more connected to your team? He came back with this idea, which was coffee with Ron. And coffee with Ron was only 30 minutes that he opened up on his calendar for people on his team to sign up and just talk. And initially, when he did that, nobody signed up. Their initial thought behind the scenes, what they were talking about, is they thought for sure he wanted to talk with them because there was going to be another round of layoffs. So nobody talked to him. So it took a while. He happened to be working with one of his associates and said, hey, I'd love to just catch up more. You know, would you like sign up for one of those open slots? So kind of cornered the guy, right? So the person came in, and at first he said it was really awkward, because I was like, hey, so tell me what's going on. And the person was just kind of looking at him like, what do you want to know? You know? And so anyway, that ended a little more abruptly, or short. It was shorter. But then another person came, and it began to become a little bit more natural, and the word got out. And the word got out around like, yeah, he actually just wants to talk to you. So bring a cup of coffee. He's just interested in how you're doing. So then there was something that switched, because then people were like, oh, well, I have to travel too, but I'd like to get on Ron's calendar. Can I switch with you, Lou? Because I can't go tomorrow, but I'm going to take your spot. So then people were jockeying just to talk with him. And then the net result of all of that was that he felt finally that he kind of knew something about people. He's like, oh, this person has a kid that's going into college. I can't even believe that. I've been working with them for 7 years, and they're ready, you know, their child is ready for college. This person had another child getting married. Somebody else was going on a big cruise for a big anniversary. So he like lit up because he now just felt connected. And so find ways to connect. And if you're the organization, find ways to encourage people, and specifically managers, to connect with one another. It's a very human need, but we know that it really is essential for our individual well-being, and it translates into the productivity and the well-being of the organization.
Yeah. What a great story. I would love to recommend that to our CEO.
There you go.
Hi, Aurel, if you're watching.
Coffee with Ron. You can change the name, but take the idea. Take the idea.
Yeah. It's not a layoff. It's just a coffee.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I think that should be the tagline. Nice. No. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really fun to hear these stories. But now I know that you want to talk a bit even more about the topic about, you know, leadership, coaching, and other things. So we do want to wrap up with this open mic section.
And here, feel free to throw in more stories and insights. It might be related to our question earlier from the audience. I think it might be a nice segue into what you want to talk about. But in this open mic, please feel free to share whatever you're most passionate about. I've heard from you at the beginning, so I'm pretty sure that you're going to talk some more about your work, and I'm excited to hear more about it.
Sure. Well, I know we only have a little bit of time, so I'll make this brief, but so a lot of my work is with organizations, with leaders, and helping people to become better coaches. So the research I do is with colleagues is in the space of understanding how coaching in organizations really leads to transformation at the individual level and the organization level. And here's what I can leave with listeners and with you too. Most of the time, we're wired to want to help. Like as human beings, in all of our relationships, whether we are a manager, a coach, a mentor, an educator, a physician, or other healthcare worker, or parents. I don't mean to leave anyone out. I'm just saying generally in all the roles that we find ourselves in, deep down inside, we want people to be successful. We want to often help them. The way we go about that, though, often gets the opposite of really what we're trying to do, because we have a tendency to want to direct people. We have a tendency to want to point out where the gaps are or what the weakness is, so to speak, and help them to fix it. And so if we're carrying around a fix-it mentality, this is the problem, you just got to fix this, then what happens is that we really don't help people. And the reason is that, especially as adults, we don't want to be directed or told what to do over and over. It negates our own ability, our own sense of our own intelligence. And just think about it for yourself. If someone's always telling you, go do this, and you're like, look, I've been doing this job for a while. I think I got it, And so the flip of that, the antidote, is to stop and think about who are the people in your life who have helped you to become who you are today. So stop and think about this. Who are the people who have really shaped your life, impacted you in such a way that it's very meaningful and memorable to recall them? And then next, think about what they said or what they did, and that really had lasting impact on you. In all of our research, we can tell you as people reflect on that, and that's a really powerful exercise for all of you. So I encourage people to do that. But as you think about the individuals, the ones who really have helped us to change, to learn, to develop, to even transform, help us to see something that we can't see in ourselves, have confidence in us when we lack it in ourselves. Maybe they encourage us to imagine and dream about possibilities that we never could have imagined. And they often help generate, or they influence us with positive emotion. So they lean into our strengths, right? As opposed to pointing out our weaknesses. And it's not that we don't learn or change if someone says, hey, you really have to fix this in order to be successful here. Sometimes we appreciate that. What I'm talking about is over time, the most powerful, impactful ways that people help one another is not that. And it's about really kind of walking side by side with people and helping them to discover who they are, what they care about, and how to really achieve that. And so asking questions, listening, making time for connection with people is really essential in order for us to be connected to one another and help one another in the ways that we really deeply desire. And so I'm hoping that leaves you and the listeners with something that's kind of concrete. We find that it actually gives people permission, to be compassionate and to be empathetic, which is really, especially now, what a lot of us need in order to thrive and flourish, and certainly to be happy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's a really powerful message. And I do hope it'll sink in to all of our listeners and
Thank you so much for being here today. It ran definitely way over time compared to our usual podcast. I think for the reason that it was a really great conversation. I hope you felt the same. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners might have picked up at least one or two new things. So yeah, after this conversation, I hope everyone will start to have a different look at work-life integration, learn more about themselves, find what works for them, and truly set the boundaries and find the balance they need, especially like the word that you mentioned earlier, to be vital, find that vitality in life. So thank you, Ellen, and hopefully we'll catch you back again next time. But for now, enjoy your break and enjoy tennis afterwards.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
You've been listening to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast, produced by the Happiness Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at ha.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.